Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thanks for Sharing. I am your host, Jackie Pack, and I'm happy to have you with me today. I'm going to start off this episode with a personal story, something that I've had to learn as a business owner running the mental health practice that I own. I have always believed in empowering my team. I trust that as highly educated professionals with advanced degrees in counseling, social work, marriage and family therapy, they know how to manage their caseloads, complete their documentation, handle billing, and even resolve conflicts among themselves. I purposely avoided micromanaging because I wanted them to feel trusted and respected as adults in their field. Also, I don't like to be micromanaged, and therefore I'm not very good at it. However, I've come to realize that this hands-off approach sometimes meant I was avoiding necessary conversations. I trusted that issues would sort themselves out, or that my team would come to me and approach me if they needed guidance or they had a question. Unfortunately, this assumption led to some significant challenges that might have been prevented with earlier direct communication. I now understand that as a leader, it's not only about giving space and trusting your team. It's also about actively engaging and addressing issues as soon as they arise. I've learned that those tough, necessary conversations are not about undermining trust, but about supporting growth and ensuring that small issues don't turn into bigger problems. And moving forward, once I started to learn this lesson, I've been committed to striking a better balance, trusting my staff, while also stepping in to facilitate conversations that help all of us work together. As I've had this personal learning as a business owner, it led me to reflect on two concepts that I want to talk about in today's episode. Today, we're going to be diving into why we resist, when resistance serves us, when it harms us, what can we do instead of just resistance, and how to better manage all of this. Let's start out talking about what resistance is. Resistance is a psychological or emotional pushback against something we perceive as threatening, uncomfortable, or unfamiliar. Resistance is part of being human. It's tied to our survival instincts, keeping us safe from potential harm. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There is not a lot of differences in how our brain and nervous system process physical threat or emotional threat. So let's talk briefly about why we resist. Resistance often arises when we face uncertainty, change, or ambiguity. We resist because staying where we are feels safer, even if it's not ideal. Resistance can also be a way to reconcile conflicting beliefs or feelings. And it is a way to protect our ego or avoid painful truths. When resistance is healthy, it's a sign of maintaining boundaries. For example, saying no to a toxic relationship or rejecting societal pressures that go against your values. When resistance becomes destructive, we might call that self-sabotage. This may happen when there is a positive change, maybe a growth opportunity. And because it's change and change makes us uncomfortable, we resist that and don't allow ourselves this opportunity. Resistance can also be destructive when it is rooted in fear-based decisions or it's rooted in unresolved trauma. If this is something you're aware of that you've done in your own personal life, you may be wondering, why did I resist the wrong things? When we're talking about resisting the wrong things, we have to look at this misdirected energy, which allows us to avoid the short-term discomfort at the expense of long-term gain. There may be an unconscious bias that resisting change because it would challenge our worldview or our identity. And then there can be shame and guilt in misdirecting resistance. Our very wiring as humans shows just how much we're geared toward maintaining the status quo. Our brains are, by design, creatures of habit. Evolutionarily, sticking to what's familiar was a survival mechanism, a way to conserve energy and potential threats. This is why so many of us experience confirmation bias. We naturally gravitate toward information that reinforces what we already believe. It's like having this internal filter that keeps out any data that might disturb our sense of security. And on the surface, this makes life simpler. But it also means that we can miss out on growth by clinging too tightly to our current views. This built-in resistance isn't just a quirky feature of our minds. It can be a barrier to personal and professional development. When we avoid challenging our beliefs or shy away from necessary conversations, we might inadvertently lock ourselves into outdated patterns or ineffective habits. This resistance, while keeping us comfortable, often prevents us from embracing change that could lead to profound improvements in how we understand ourselves and how we interact with the world. The past several weeks, I've had several clients that I've worked with for a while at this fork in the road, so to speak, of either continuing to resist or to open up and start to get curious and explore. As a mental health professional who's been in the field for a long time, I think that often clients come to this place several times before they could start to unravel things that would lead to growth or to maintain the status quo. And often they've avoided it for whatever reason. So I think there is something to the timing of when they get to that same space, to that same place of having this fork in the road, of standing at this fork in the road and deciding this time to go down the path they haven't in the past. Let me give some examples so you know what I'm talking about. One of my clients that I've worked with for a while, several years, often talks about how uncomfortable he is or he doesn't understand when people complain. Now, if you've been in therapy yourself, you might think, ding, 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 that's significant. And I've known that. And he has not. And we've had the discussion before. It's not like I won't challenge that or push back on that. But for him, that is seen as just complaining. And he has not seen the benefit, whether it's from partner or friends. He gets slightly annoyed when people complain. Recently, he started to become curious about that. And he's able to talk about things in our therapy sessions that previously we did a drive-by of, but we never actually could spend an entire session on, let alone 2 sessions back to back. And he's starting to recognize that sometimes when people are complaining, they're not actually complaining, they're talking about the pain of something. And he started to go internal this time instead of judging. And he's looking at some of his own pain that previously he was judging. Yes, he was judging others, but he was also judging himself, and that barrier kept him from becoming curious about this pain inside of himself. Another client, when I started working with her, told me about a situation that might have happened to them. She told me that she really didn't have memories of it, but she had heard people in her family talking about it when she was somewhat young. And in one of our first sessions, she told me, I don't want to know if this is true, so don't take me to that place where I have to know for myself if this is true or not. And I would tell her at the time, I don't remember exactly how I said it, but I told her, I don't really have the power to control whether you ever know the truth or not of that situation. These are just two examples of clients recently where this resistance they have had has started to give way, and they're seeing things differently. And they're opening themselves up to possibilities that previously their resistance was blocking. To be clear, the resistance isn't laziness or defiance. It's a shield against overwhelming pain that they're not able to handle. And I've seen this time and again as clients stabilize, as they start to get more regulated, and they start to feel safer with themselves, this starts to happen. What I typically ask them as we're exploring this in our session is, are you tolerating this? Are you tolerating these new emotions or this new perspective that's coming? One of them recently told me as we were talking about this, she said, I laid in bed all day Saturday and I cried and I slept and then I cried and I slept. And she said, but yeah, I think I am tolerating. I think that was tolerating it. Tolerating it doesn't mean that there aren't painful emotions. It doesn't mean that it might take us out for a day. Tolerating it is just that we can allow the presence of those painful emotions. There are tools to help us to work through resistance. And I also want to say that timing is also pretty key in whether or not these tools work effectively. We can start to have awareness and to identify when and why our resistance shows up. We can shift from judgment to curiosity and ask, what is this resistance really trying to tell me? We can break down big changes into manageable parts to reduce the overwhelming feelings. And then we can seek support from therapists, from friends, from partners, or communities when resistance feels too big to face alone. I want you to think for a minute here if there's been something that you've been resisting lately. Is it protecting you or is it holding you back? And then let's pivot to the other concept that I want to talk about today. And I think these two concepts are often interrelated and interwoven. The second concept is the concept of dissent. Dissent, I want to say up front, is this power to say no. It's not the enemy of connection. It's the beginning of authentic belonging. The courage to say no or to express doubt creates space for meaningful yeses. As you reflect on your own resistance, consider where you might also embrace dissent as a path to clarity, empowerment, and change. Resistance and dissent are closely related, but they're not the same. While resistance often operates as a reflex or a defense, dissent is intentional. It's a deliberate act of saying no to what doesn't align with our values, beliefs, or our sense of self. Dissent is essential for growth and for diversity. It's how we create space for different perspectives and foster environments where diverse ideas are valued. When we make space for dissent, we show respect for a wide range of beliefs and perspectives. True inclusion or true belonging means allowing others to say, I see this differently, without fear of exclusion. Whereas sometimes with resistance, we'll comply, and when they tell us how they see it, or sometimes we just even sense in our body what they want us to say, we'll go ahead and resist how we actually feel, and we'll comply and we'll accept the story that they want us to have or that makes them comfortable. There's this idea in dissent of a paradox of truth. And it sounds like this: for every great idea, the opposite idea also holds truth. Dissent reminds us to embrace complexity and move beyond binary thinking. Without the ability to say no, our yes loses its power. Doubt and dissent are necessary to make our commitments meaningful. As leaders, whether in therapy, organizations, or communities, our role isn't to resolve every doubt or every argument. Authentic dissent is complete in its expression. Our job is to approach it with curiosity and interest, not defensiveness. Dissent often marks a turning point in personal growth. The moment we say no to what others expect us to be, or to roles that no longer fit us, we begin to claim our true identity. We can also say adulthood, functional adulthood, begins when we declare, I'm not that person. In this declaration, we make room for ourselves to take up space as full-fledged members of our communities, even when we don't conform to others' expectations. And we allow others to express dissent without fear of losing their place in the relationship. And this strengthens trust and belonging. A couple weeks ago in group, we were discussing these two concepts, resistance and dissent. And I think there's some powerful questions that I had asked the men in the group to consider. And I want you to reflect on these questions as well as you think about dissent. What is the no or refusal that you keep postponing? What have you said yes to that you no longer mean? What resentment do you hold that no one knows about? And what is a commitment that you have changed your mind about? Consider what happens when someone, maybe even you, decides to break a pattern. When a person challenges the way they've always seen something, when they stop resisting and they open themselves to the possibility of change, it's nothing short of remarkable. It's a moment of vulnerability, a deliberate step into uncertainty, and it often marks the beginning of genuine transformation. This isn't being contrarian for the sake of it. It's about tapping into a deeper potential to evolve. It's like resetting your internal thermostat, allowing for a recalibration that can lead to new insights, more self-awareness, better decisions, and richer, more authentic experiences. In environments where conformity often reigns, whether that's in our personal lives, our workplaces, or society at large, dissent becomes a catalyst for innovation. By questioning established norms or narratives that you were given, and welcoming alternative viewpoints, we challenge the very mechanisms that keep us stuck in the past. This willingness to step into the discomfort of change fosters true growth. And while that discomfort might feel unsettling at first, it is a clear signal that we're on the brink of something new and valuable. In therapy, dissent might look like questioning a therapist's perspective or resisting a suggested direction or connection. These moments of dissent are not roadblocks, but opportunities for deeper understanding. It's important for the therapist to model curiosity and respect for dissent, demonstrating how to explore differences without judgment. For clients, embracing dissent within themselves, acknowledging doubts or conflicts or changes in their values, can be a liberating step towards authenticity. Again, let me give you examples here. It's not uncommon in my experience for me to have asked a question early in my work with a client. And the client said, no, I haven't struggled with that, or no, that's not something that's true for me. Maybe that's not an issue, or they don't resonate with something that I might suggest or try to connect. Only for them, months or even years into their journey, tell me that these things are true for them, or they're struggling with a situation that I had asked about. Often in those moments, I don't usually know if they remembered that I had asked them about this or suggested that. And I don't really think it matters. They may say, I don't know if I ever told you this. Or they might say, I had this epiphany where I realized, and then they go on to say this. And that may be something that I've said, 50 times. Again, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they remembered that I had said it multiple times. It doesn't matter if they remember I had asked a question a while ago. I think what matters is that they came to this realization, or they came to this place where they could share this certain thing and put it on the table in their time and in their consciousness. These moments of dissent are opportunities for growth. And we need to make sure we don't see dissent as an opportunity for conflict. Let me talk more specifically about in general. Okay, I'm not going to talk about a particular sex addict, but I do want to give an example for someone struggling with sex addiction. And then I want to give an example for somebody whose partner is a sex addict and they're struggling with betrayal trauma. But the core, someone with a sexual addiction may be resisting deeper, often painful truths about themselves. We often talk with our clients about addiction being a disease of escape. So this resistance can take several forms. The addictive behavior can serve as a shield, keeping them from confronting feelings of shame, loneliness, or past trauma. By engaging in compulsive sexual behavior, they can avoid the vulnerability that comes with truly feeling and processing their emotions. Often the addiction might be a way to compensate for a lack of authentic connection or self-worth. They may resist admitting that they're trying to fill an emotional void rather than merely seeking physical gratification. And change is inherently scary, and continuing the addiction can feel like a way to maintain a familiar, even if destructive, pattern. There's resistance to acknowledging that their current way of coping isn't serving them in the long run, and that change might mean facing uncertainty. When a person begins to let go of this resistance, several transformative insights can emerge. They may see that the addiction wasn't a choice made in isolation, but a form of dissent against a deeper part of themselves. In recognizing that their behavior was a way of saying no to vulnerability or authentic connection, they can start to untangle the true source of their pain. Letting go of resistance often means embracing the discomfort of vulnerability. In doing so, they might discover that facing their feelings, rather than numbing them or escaping them, opens the door to real healing, more genuine relationships, and a sense of self-worth and meaning. There's a powerful dissenting voice within that may have been silenced by the addiction. The part of them that desires to be whole, open, and connected. When they stop resisting, they can start to honor that voice, paving the way for recovery and personal growth. Now let's talk about partners experiencing betrayal trauma. Partners of sex addicts often grapple with their own form of resistance as they try to maintain a coherent narrative of their relationship. In an effort to preserve the image of the person they love or the idea of their relationship, they may resist fully acknowledging the betrayal. This can be a way to avoid the intense pain and disruption that comes with admitting that their trust has been deeply violated. There can be a strong resistance to accepting that things have changed irrevocably. The partner may hold on to memories and hopes of returning to how things were. They might engage in safety-seeking behaviors and try to control things so that the addict doesn't continue to act out, which delays the necessary process of grieving and rebuilding. In the midst of betrayal trauma, it's common for partners to suppress their feelings in order to maintain stability, to avoid conflict, effectively resisting the full spectrum of their own emotional experience. When partners begin to confront and move past this resistance, a profound personal dissent and subsequent healing can occur. Acknowledging the full impact of betrayal can be a radical act of self-affirmation. They may come to recognize that their pain, anger, and grief are valid, and that they have the right to prioritize their emotional well-being. Letting go of the need to cling to a former ideal allows them to assert a new narrative for their lives, one that honors their own needs, boundaries, and right to healing. This can be a powerful act of dissent against the forces that tried to silence their experience. By accepting the truth of what happened, partners can begin to rebuild trust. Not necessarily in the relationship as it was, but in themselves and in their ability to move forward. This recognition can spark a transformative journey towards reclaiming personal power and redefining what healthy relationships look like. Both journeys, the one from within the cycle of sexual addiction and the one stemming from betrayal trauma, share a common thread: the resistance to change, to facing painful truths, and to breaking away from the familiar. Yet when that resistance is overcome, it opens up a space for genuine transformation, healing, and a more authentic way of living. For many people, they have silenced this voice of dissent for a very long time, and it was probably necessary if that was the case. But as you're working on healing, we have to recognize, we have to start to work towards connecting to that voice of dissent within us. Dissent often emerges in the body before it makes its way up to our brain. Your physical sensations can be your first clue that something feels misaligned. Learning to tune into these signals helps you uncover your truth and act on it with clarity. There are specific signs of dissent in the body. Tension, a clenched jaw, tight shoulders, or fidgeting could indicate unresolved resistance. The pit in the stomach feeling is often a visceral sign that something doesn't sit right and we're having that gut reaction. Feeling drained or heavy could suggest that you're agreeing to something that doesn't serve you. And racing heart or sweaty palms are common signs when considering dissent, but fearing confrontation or judgment. There are practices for recognizing body signals. The first one is a body scan exercise. Finding a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths. And then starting at your head and moving downward. Notice each part of your body. Your jaw, your neck, shoulders, chest, stomach, and legs. And ask yourself, where am I holding tension or discomfort? Again, you would do that much slower than I just did. And then just notice without judgment. Just observe. Another practice for recognizing body signals is to pause and reflect. When you feel uneasy or hesitant, pause before reacting. I don't mean pause for a minute or two. Sometimes that may be all that we need. Sometimes we have to say, I'm going to have to get back to you. And we might take 24 hours to get back to them. But when we ask for that pause, we need to then go internal and ask ourselves, what am I feeling in my body right now? And what is this sensation trying to tell me? Am I agreeing to something my body feels misaligned with? After noticing physical sensations of dissent, it can be important to write down what you're feeling and what might be causing it. Meaning this triggering event. What happened that led to those physical sensations of dissent? Journaling it or writing it down, even in your notes section on your phone, can be helpful because we're starting to learn these things. And while you might have that awareness in the moment, as with anything new that we're practicing, we can easily forget those things. There might be some questions as you're writing it down to explore. What specific situation or decision is triggering this feeling? Does this feeling remind me of a past experience? What action might feel more aligned with my values or needs? It can also be helpful if you've already become aware of some of the trauma scripts that result from the trauma that you've experienced. So in this situation, these questions that I just gave you to explore, if one of your trauma beliefs was foregoing your heart's desires or what you've wanted, your dreams, or to stay small, then that feeling of being big, pursuing something that you want, is going to counteract with that belief that you learned from unresolved trauma or from attachment disruptions that says stay small or prioritize others or yourself. It's important to be able to determine the difference in your body between this trauma script and your authentic voice. If fear or anxiety arises when you're considering dissent, practice some grounding exercises. You can place your feet flat on the ground and just take some slow, deep breaths, counting to 4 on the inhale, 6 on the exhale. Name 3 things you can see, hear, and feel around you to bring yourself into the present. The next step is starting to own your dissent. Step 1 in owning your dissent is to work through the resistance. Identify when the resistance shows up, asking yourself, what is this resistance trying to tell me? And being aware whether this is a trauma script where you're complying, or if it's your authentic voice. And then dissent often takes practice for us to do it well. Start with curiosity. Approach dissent in yourself or another with an open mind. Practice setting boundaries that honor your values so that you can say no with clarity. And then reflect on your commitments. Revisit what you've said yes to and decide if that still aligns. When we start to express our dissent authentically, it usually starts non-verbally within ourselves, where we acknowledge the feeling. Internally, we affirm this dissent before we start to share that or speak that. We might just notice that we feel uneasy about this decision. And then we validate that feeling is, and then we affirm that feeling is valid. We use I statements in expressing our dissent. I feel unsure about this direction. Express your dissent without blame. It might sound like, I feel unsure about this direction, or I'd like to explore another perspective. And then set boundaries clearly. Own your no with clarity and compassion. This doesn't feel right for me, and I need to step back. I value this relationship, but I need to approach this differently. And all of these things take practice with self-validation. Reminding yourself that dissent is an act of integrity. This may sound like it's okay to prioritize my truth, even if it's uncomfortable for me and the other person. Recognizing and owning dissent in your body is a skill that takes practice, but it's deeply empowering. By tuning into your physical signals and acting on them, you will begin to strengthen your connection to that authentic self. Remember, dissent isn't about rejection. It's about honoring your truth and creating space for what truly aligns with you. Owning dissent isn't just about saying no. It's about claiming your voice, your boundaries, and your values. When you trust your body and you can act on its signals, you step into greater self-respect and authenticity. Our natural wiring may push us to maintain the status quo. But every time we dare to challenge that wiring, every time we let go of the safe confines of confirmation bias, we open the door to transformation. These moments of dissent are not just acts of defiance. They are powerful opportunities to redefine who we are and what we can become. Embracing change, as hard as it might be, is one of the most courageous and rewarding steps that we can take on our journey of growth. At the end of this episode, I want to remind you that your story matters. Remember, there's something meaningful in every chapter. Don't wait to share your story until it's finished. Until next time, Jackie.